In the weeks that followed, the deal was finalized. A 7-figure investment came through, giving Marcus the funds to scale his startup and bring his product to market. He didn't rush to buy a new car. Instead, he kept the old one for a while longer, not out of necessity, but as a reminder. A reminder of every time someone underestimated him, of every night he almost gave up, and of how staying true to the vision mattered more than how things looked on the surface. People may have mocked his old car, but in the end, it drove him straight into a future they never saw coming. Inside the building, Darren had already been there. He met briefly with the investor's assistant, casually dropping comments about Marcus, calling him a dreamer, saying he was all talk, hinting that his pitch was more hope than strategy. It wasn't a direct attack, but it was enough to plant doubt. Darren walked away smiling, convinced his interference would be enough to tilt the room before Marcus even arrived. Meanwhile, Marcus rode the elevator up to the 19th floor, unaware of what had been said. He carried nothing but his laptop and a small case with a prototype, the heart of his project. Each step toward the meeting room felt heavier than the last. The receptionist gave him a polite nod, but something in her expression felt off, like she knew something he didn't. As he waited outside the boardroom, voices echoed faintly from inside. One of them mentioned his name. Another asked, "Is he really worth our time?" Marcus froze. His stomach turned. This was it. Everything he'd worked for, all coming down to the next few minutes. And someone had already tried to poison the room. The boardroom door opened, and Marcus was greeted with polite, reserved nods. The energy in the room felt colder than he expected. The investor, Mr. Langford, sat at the head of the table, calm, unreadable. Marcus began his pitch, keeping his voice steady, walking them through the problem his product solved, the market potential, and how it could revolutionize small business logistics. But something wasn't right. The questions came harder than usual, sharper. A few board members looked disinterested, some even skeptical before he'd reached the halfway point. Then came the twist he never saw coming. Mr. Langford folded his hands and asked, "Can you explain the discrepancies in your patent filing dates?" Marcus blinked, confused. "Your application shows a conflicting timestamp. Same design, filed by someone else 3 days before yours." The room fell silent. Marcus's throat went dry. He hadn't shared the prototype with anyone outside his trusted circle. He'd been so careful. But now someone had filed a near-identical version, just days before him. It hit him like a punch. Darren. Somehow, he'd gotten access to Marcus's early files, enough to replicate the concept and submit it under a fake name. The betrayal stung more than the accusation. And now, standing in front of a group who thought he was the thief, Marcus had seconds to decide what to do. If he didn't clear his name, and fast, the deal, his credibility, and the dream he'd built from nothing would vanish in an instant. Marcus took a deep breath. His hands trembled, but his voice didn't. "That's not a coincidence," he said, locking eyes with Mr. Langford. "Someone at my office got into my files. I didn't share the prototype with anyone outside my home, except the internal network, which now I realize wasn't secure enough." The room stayed quiet. Marcus pulled out a small flash drive from his case. "This has a full timeline. Design files, date-stamped edits, email threads. If you check the metadata, you'll see my work goes back months, long before the other submission." Mr. Langford raised an eyebrow and gestured to his assistant, who plugged the drive in. As they scrolled through the files, something shifted in the room. People leaned in. The data didn't just prove Marcus's case, it showed how detailed and thorough his process had been. The investor nodded slowly, clearly impressed. "This is more than a concept," he said. "It's a business." But just as relief started to wash over Marcus, the assistant paused. "Sir, you should see this." She turned the screen to show a recent login to Marcus's cloud storage from an IP address registered to the same office building. Mr. Langford looked up. "Do you know a Darren Whitmore?" Marcus nodded, jaw tight. Good, Langford said, because he just made the biggest mistake of his life. The room turned as a new voice entered from behind. Darren, unaware the meeting was still going, stepped in, right into the middle of his own exposure. Darren froze the moment he saw the room staring at him. His smirk disappeared. Mr. Langford didn't raise his voice. He simply stood and said, "Security will escort you out. We don't do business with thieves." Darren tried to protest, but the damage was done. The evidence was clear. He had stolen files, faked a patent submission, and nearly cost Marcus everything. As he was led out, the silence in the room broke, not with words, but with a shift in respect. Marcus stood there, still catching his breath. Mr. Langford walked over and extended a hand. "Let's talk numbers," he said with a genuine smile. That old car outside, it didn't matter. The worn suit, the quiet nature, none of it mattered anymore. What counted was the idea, the persistence, and the proof that Marcus had built something real. They laughed behind his back. Some didn't even bother hiding it. Every morning, as Marcus pulled into the office parking lot in his rusty old sedan, heads turned, not in admiration, but in judgment. Dents on the doors, faded paint, an engine that coughed more than it roared. It was the kind of car that made people assume things. "Must be struggling," they'd whisper. Some even asked why he didn't just lease something nicer, like everyone else. But Marcus never explained. He didn't need to. Because while they were busy mocking, he was quietly working on something they couldn't see, a deal so big it could change everything. What they didn't know was that every scratch on that car told a story. It wasn't just an old vehicle, it was a symbol of sacrifice, late nights, and a dream that refused to die. And when the opportunity finally came, a meeting that could seal a $1 million business deal, Marcus didn't show up in a flashy ride. He drove that same old car, the one everyone looked down on, right up to the gates of a future none of them saw coming. But what happened next? That part no one expected, because the moment he stepped out of that car, something changed. The meeting, the reaction, the twist, it flipped everything upside down. And by the end of the day, Marcus wasn't the one being laughed at anymore. You won't believe what unfolded next. Marcus didn't come from money. In fact, most of his life had been about making the most of what little he had. That old car, it wasn't just a ride, it was a reminder. A reminder of the nights he slept in it after working late, the weekends he spent delivering food to keep his business dream alive, and the countless times he chose investing in his idea over spending on himself. While his co-workers showed off new watches, expensive shoes, and leased luxury cars, Marcus was investing every spare dollar into a tech project he'd been building in silence, something he believed could change an entire industry. The office never saw that side of him. To them, he was the quiet guy in the corner, always in second-hand suits, always the first to leave without saying much. But behind closed doors, Marcus had been in talks with investors, refining his pitch, and building a prototype in his garage. No flashy team, no big-name backers, just pure grit, vision, and a plan. That meeting, it wasn't a regular one. It was with a high-profile entrepreneur who had built a fortune spotting underdogs. Someone who didn't care about appearances, just results. Marcus had one shot, and everything was riding on it. But there was one problem. Someone at the office had found out. And before Marcus even stepped into the boardroom, a quiet storm had already started brewing behind his back, one that could ruin everything if he wasn't careful. It started with whispers in the break room. Someone had seen Marcus' calendar and noticed the meeting. Word spread fast. He thinks he's landing $1 million deal. The idea seemed laughable to most. A few even made bets on how badly he'd crash and burn. One co-worker, Darren, had always seen Marcus as competition. He smiled to his face, but had a habit of digging into things he wasn't supposed to. When he overheard the name of the investor Marcus was meeting, he made a call, not to help, but to sabotage. Meanwhile, Marcus had no idea he was being watched so closely. He spent every night that week rehearsing his pitch, making sure every number was right, every slide was clear. His prototype, a small device that could streamline logistics for small businesses, was finally working. He believed in it. He knew it had potential. But belief wasn't always enough, especially when someone else was quietly trying to pull the rug out from under him. At home, Marcus's wife noticed the stress. He barely slept. Every time she asked if he was okay, he'd smile and say, "Almost there." She didn't know the full picture, how one wrong move could cost him everything he'd worked for. And back at the office, Darren wasn't done yet. He'd scheduled a meeting with the same investor, pretending to represent someone else. His plan was simple: discredit Marcus before he even walked through the door, and the clock was ticking. The morning of the pitch arrived. Rain tapped against Marcus's windshield as he sat in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the tall glass building ahead. His old car looked completely out of place next to the sleek black sedans and luxury SUVs. But he didn't flinch. He checked his notes one last time, took a deep breath, and stepped out.